My Dark Web Experience, The Visiting, by Tales from the Abyss. This occurred not long after I turned 18 years old. My girlfriend had also just turned 18 a few days ago, which meant her parents would finally trust her and I enough to be in the house alone while they went out to dinner. My girlfriend had always been a fan of horror films and creepy things in general. She loved reading creepypastas and watching dark, gory movies like Hostel or Saw. One evening, I was sitting with her while she finished watching the last few minutes of The Human Centipede. We both had a few drinks and I was about to go to bed, but she suggested that we look for other horror films to watch online. Despite my tiredness, I obliged. After a few minutes of searching on her laptop, it revealed her favorite film site had been taken down. That's when she suggested a chilling alternative. "Have you ever heard of the dark web?" she asked. I mean, I had heard whispers around school, but I never took much interest in it. "Yeah, I have," I said, trying to act brave. A smile of excitement appeared on her face. I could tell that she was slightly drunk and in a sort of I don't care what happens mood. I decided to go to the kitchen and fetch her some water. When I came back, I noticed she had a site opened called Censor View. The site displayed pictures of movie posters that I had never seen. I correctly assumed that it was a site that sold banned horror movies from other countries. All of them looked, pretty unoriginal. Nothing I hadn't seen before. All except for one. The one my girlfriend was hovering the mouse over. The movie was called The Visiting. The display picture was simply a white background with The Visiting written in black Arial font. We were both just fascinated as to what it was. I took out my iPhone and searched the plot for the film, and yet I found nothing. Just a few stupid YouTube videos and irrelevant forums. However, when I looked back up from my phone, I caught a glimpse of my girlfriend typing her name and address into various boxes on the page titled Order Details. Before, to my horror, she clicked the submit button. I was caught in a state of anger and shock. I manically just shouted at her, explaining how dangerous it was dispersing her personal details into such a fucked up place as the dark web. I could see that my attempts to correct her were futile. The alcohol was hitting her pretty hard. She wasn't paying any attention whatsoever. Frustrated, I just decided to go to bed and that we would discuss it the next morning. The next morning, she seemed to have a little bit of regret over her actions. She spent the morning explaining in detail how she was curious and that she wasn't in any danger. She commented that the experience would be fun. However, I wasn't convinced. She told me not to tell her parents, fearing that they wouldn't trust her to be alone in the house again. I promised that I wouldn't say anything, and then headed back home. 3 days later, I was visiting her house again. Her parents had gone to meet with some friends from work for a drink, and we were watching The Exorcist on DVD. During a particularly non-eventful part of the film, my girlfriend began joking about how horrified I looked a few days ago when we were discussing the dark web. She said that she had only received a fairly professional-looking email confirming the order, but nothing else. I began to yield to her argument. Perhaps I was overreacting. It was merely a few seconds after our conversation had finished that an aggressive knock came from the front door. It did sound like it was from 2 doors, but I dismissed it as an echo. I began to look concerned, while my girlfriend began laughing once the look of terror took over my face. I put on a fake smile and walked towards the door. It erased clean from my face as soon as I saw who was standing outside. A tall, stocky man wearing a ski mask and dark clothes stood in front of the door wielding a hammer. I was about to call out to my girlfriend to call the police when a blood-curdling scream echoed through the house. I raced back into the room to see my girlfriend pointing at the window, facing the backyard. An identical man stood at the window. He was holding a small bat. I grabbed my girlfriend's hand and we sprinted up the stairs. We hid in the master bedroom while I called the police on my mobile, who told me that they would be there as soon as possible. I finished the call and heard one of the doors smash, and then loud, rapid footsteps running up the stairs. They were in the house. Without thinking, I pushed the window open and told my girlfriend to jump, to run and not look back. She jumped and landed safely in the grassy backyard. I was about to follow but hesitated, wondering if I could put up a fight in doing so, allow my girlfriend a little more time to escape. It was then I heard a deep, aggressive voice just on the other side of the room. The man shouted something in a foreign language, whilst I heard laughing from two other men outside. All of my bravery evaporated. I jumped, landing harshly on my ankle. The adrenaline racing through my body was so powerful that it allowed me to push through the pain. Eventually, I caught up with my girlfriend. We were running for what seemed like hours, but in reality, it was most likely 10 minutes. We ended up next to a local park, a safe distance away from the house. My girlfriend began sobbing and I comforted her, trying to avoid my own desire to break down. It wasn't long after that the police called me on my phone. They were at the house and, as far as I could tell, the attackers were just gone. After taking a few minutes to compose ourselves, my girlfriend and I made our way back. There were 3 police officers at the house. One was examining each room for any damage or evidence left by the men. One was comforting my girlfriend, while the other one was asking me questions. The shock was clouding my memory. I was only able to tell them a few details about their clothing, and the fact that they spoke in an Eastern European language. My girlfriend handed over her phone and computer for the police to investigate, and then they left. They advised us to tell the homeowners of the situation, lock up, and suggested that everyone spend the night at a friend or a relative's house. So we both spent the night at my parents' house, while my girlfriend's parents stayed with friends. I remember my girlfriend just crying on the phone while telling them about the situation. They were furious. A few days later, the police visited my girlfriend. It was just by luck that I happened to be at her house that afternoon. Their investigation had led them to some disturbing findings. It turned out that the visiting was a nickname that the locals in a small Polish town gave to a number of really brutal murders that occurred in the 90s. The murders were committed by an unknown gang, and were initially dismissed as home invasions gone wrong. All the victims were bludgeoned to death in their own home, although nothing of value was ever taken from the house. It was only 2 years after the murder began that a family survived an attack by the gang. The husband was able to give the Polish police a few details about the attackers, but all that he could reveal was that they wore ski masks and wielded blunt objects, and that one of them had a video camera. However, the crucial evidence was that one of the attackers had dropped a backpack containing 1 blank videotape and 3 other tapes with content on them. The 3 tapes showed the horrific murders of the other victims of the attackers. The police came to a shocking conclusion that these men, they were creating snuff films to be sold to whatever sickos would pay enough for them. A nationwide manhunt began, but even years after the investigation started, nothing was found. I remember feeling incredibly cold as the police told me their findings. They went on to tell me that the men most likely fled Poland during the police search, and possibly entered the UK as workers. Knew for certain was that these men were operating once again, decades after their last murder, and that they were using the dark web as a way of deciding on their next victims. The police told my girlfriend's family to move in with a relative while the investigation was going on. It wasn't long after that when my girlfriend broke up with me, by her parents' wishes. I assume that her parents suspected me of forcing her into using the dark web. My girlfriend discovered later that various documents containing her information had been taken from the house. I'm not allowed to see her, but our parents still speak. From what they tell me, her mental state has become incredibly fragile. It just broke my heart to hear this. I can safely say that the police will never find the attackers using the information I gave them, which means they will most likely strike again. I can only hope that the next time they do, it will lead to those bastards ending up behind bars, and not the creation of another tape to add to their collection. Be safe, and avoid using the dark web. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of my lovely patrons listed on screen: Dan R., Cody V, Paul Z, Chaos X, Mr. Swiston, Official Jerboa, JY, Pyromancer, Hayden MH, Ethan A, and Dark Side of the Bear. Guys, thank you so much. It's taking me a little bit longer to record the next Patreon story because, if you didn't know it, I completely remodeled my office, and that kind of knocked me out of the recording game for a couple of days, but don't worry, it is coming. Thank you so much for watching. And if you would like access to some Patreon-only stories, your name in the credits, and all the different tiers that are up on Patreon, please go take a look. Thank you.